There is always a purpose. The story before us today in Mark is one of the most famous stories in the Bible. It's a sad, tragic story, no doubt, but it grabs you. It seizes your imagination. It is like a car crash. You do not want to watch these events unfold, but you cannot turn away. And the truth is, aside from the story of Jesus and some of the Old Testament favorites, there's probably no tale in the Scriptures that has received more attention from the artistic community than this story of a young girl and her dance, and the horrible result of that dance, the death of John the Baptist. Her name, the name of the young dancer, is not in our Bible. Mark simply calls her Herodias after her mother. But Josephus, the Jewish historian who chronicled a lot of the history around the time of Christ, gives us her name. It was Salome. The story of Salome and her dance has inspired great paintings, plays, opera. The dance has even been given a name, the Dance of the Seven Veils. The depiction of this dance in the famous old movie about Jesus, the greatest story ever told, still is noted time and time again in books about movies, in any talk about film lore, and yes, even on Wikipedia. And why? Why does this story grab us? Because there's always a purpose. And the idea of what the purpose of each of these characters was grabs your imagination. Herod had a purpose, that's for certain. He had stolen and married his brother's wife and stolen his niece in the process. A marriage that John the Baptist declared unlawful. But that was only Herod's reason for putting him in jail, not for killing him. Because our Bible tells us as much as John was a troublemaker, Herod liked him. He liked to listen to him. There was something in the truth John proclaimed that Herod liked to hear. But here's where we, like the artists, get intrigued. Because while Herod wants to hear the good old story of truth, a beautiful young girl dancing before him can make him forget himself, make him say things, stupid, foolish things, that he will have to back up in front of the guests. And then there's the mother, Herodias. No doubt she was very beautiful as well, and angry. Very angry. Who wants to hear a desert madman dressed in rags and eating bugs calling your marriage unholy? Who wants to hear a peasant telling a princess, a queen, that she is not right with God? Oh, she wanted his head. And she had wanted it for some time. But her husband, with his soft heart and latent religious tendencies, would only take the preacher out of his pulpit and lock him up. He would not kill him. What a conundrum. What a fascinating situation to write plays and songs around. And then, yes, there's this girl, the beautiful girl. Make no mistake, our artists have had some fun with her. She's really Herod's niece, the daughter of his brother. But she excites the old man's heart. And she makes him reveal that while part of his heart longs for the pure, the other part is lecherous. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? So very human. The artists telling this story have portrayed Salome as a person who is anywhere from in love with John the Baptist to someone who has no idea what's really happening, a wide-eyed adolescent being led by a power-hungry mother. Her role is a mystery. We don't know if she just liked to dance, if she just wanted to please the adults, if she danced only out of duty and expectation, or if she had her own motives in this plot being woven to ensnare Herod. We only know she danced for Uncle and listened to Mom. And I, for one, when I read this story now, can't help but wonder if she was simply a pawn being pushed about by the adults. Perhaps the second innocent victim of this tale. Then there's the one we've almost forgotten about, and his purpose, John. John's purpose is simple. It's the Word, the truth of God. That is all his life has been about, and yet he is the one lost. This story is told so often and in so many different ways because it has the classic elements of conflict. Powerful characters, some aware of their power, some not aware of their power, with different purposes, all converging to take down the character that seems to be the strongest and at the same time destroys the wholly innocent, the one whose purpose was simply to be an instrument of God. You know, we all have purposes in life. And we often live those purposes out while pretending that we're dancing with God. It happens. We're human. And I imagine that Herod and Herodias, while leaving Salome adrift in the wake of their schemes, made a good show, at least on the surface, of living the lives of proper Jewish royalty. But only John, in this tale, dances with God. You know, I wish I had a warmer, fuzzier example to show you today of someone living for God's purpose. It's hard to imagine all of us getting really excited about following God's will when you see the person in the story who did ended up with his head on a platter. But at the same time, is there anything more important? We're faced with a dilemma in this world. Modern culture teaches us, get all you can for yourself, do what you want, when you want to do it. The really important thing in life is satisfying your immediate desires. And we've even twisted the words of Jesus to make all of this seem just fine. And all around us we see people living these ideas out. And a lot of times we see these ideas result in disaster. Except, most of the time, people don't end up dead. There's a lot going on in this scene of a young girl dancing that mirrors the scandals we see in the world concerning infidelity, scandals involving sexual abuse. We look around us and we see people at war within themselves, at war with their own desires, or in love with their own desire for control and power, or in love with their own greatness, and accustomed to doing as they please when they please. And often we see these people strangely confident that God is with them, until eventually they fall, often tragically. The problem with humanity is the same problem that occurred a long time ago in a garden with a couple of teenagers and a certain tree. We want what we want now. Our purpose too often is simply pleasing ourselves. But if we want a good life, a truly happy and fulfilling life, we can't live like that. We can't live only for the moment. Live in the moment, that's good, but you can't live for the moment. To have a good life, we have to have another purpose. We have to live like the person we want to become. We have to start building our past, lest like Herod, our past comes back to haunt us. And the best way to become the person we want to be is to follow God. If we want to grow old and look back at a good life, we need to see our own lives in the sense of becoming, and make our purpose the purpose of living for what we want to become. And that means holding ourselves accountable for our actions. living not to satisfy every whim and desire, but living with honor for those we love and with honor for all those around us. Living like you are trying to build a life and not like you're just gorging yourself on the empty calories of your own whims. You know, what if Herod had not allowed power or lust or whatever it was to drive him to marry his brother's wife? What if he had held his tongue after his niece danced, laughed at himself and said, "Hey, down, old man"? What if he had cared for his people enough to let their preacher go? Even though, yes, he would have had to endure the sharp tongue of the Baptist. The truth, John probably still would have died. I think the Romans eventually would have seen to it. The Romans did not like anyone who gathered large crowds of followers. But how different would our view of Herod's life be? How differently would we view Herodias and Salome through the lens of 2,000 years? You know, God is calling us to build lives, understanding that we're sinful, understanding that we mess up. God is calling us to build lives that we can look back at in 2,000 years and be proud of. And God will give us the strength to do this, the same strength that sustained the Baptist even in death. The strength to live for God's purpose and the wisdom to realize that doing justice, loving mercy, and walking humbly with our God is the most important thing we could hope to live for. This week, as we look at our lives, let's think about living for God's purpose. It's never too early or too late to start, and the reward will not simply be pleasing to God. I think in the fullness of time, the reward will be pretty pleasing to each of us as well.